All right. Well, again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin Moran. I'm a director with ULI Philadelphia. We really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their afternoon to learn a little bit more about our technical assistance panel program. And in a few minutes, I will pass things over to some of our member volunteers and leaders who help us run the program. And then a little bit later, we'll have the opportunity to hear from some past sponsors about their experience in participating in the technical assistance panel program. But before we do that, I wanted to take a step back to just quickly review, and spend a little bit of time kind of on background about who the Urban Land Institute is, who our members are, and what our mission is. So the Urban Land Institute is a mission-driven membership and educational organization whose mission is to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. And we do this through a few different mission commitments, including connecting practitioners, inspiring best practices, and leading serving a leadership role in solving complex real estate and land use issues in communities. And to that last point, the TAPS program plays a really pivotal role in fulfilling our mission. ULI Philadelphia is part of the Global Urban Land Institute network. We have about 900 or more members in our local region and about 45,000 members worldwide. The Urban Land Institute is made up of interdisciplinary real estate and land use practitioners, meaning our members are developers, they're lenders, they're designers, they're planners. They're from the public sector, they're from the private sector, and really anyone who touches the land use process from start to finish can be a member at ULI and really sort of influences the way that we approach how we think about the built environment, land use, and real estate. The ULI Philadelphia District Council specifically reaches the greater Philadelphia area, but also includes 4 satellite regions as well. So we include central Pennsylvania, the state of Delaware, the Lehigh Valley, and southern New Jersey within our footprint of ULI Philadelphia members. And everything that we do as an organization is really volunteer-led and member-led. So we have 20 different committees and councils. Technical assistance panels is one of those 20 committees and councils that are all led by a team of anywhere between 5 and 40 members and 1 to 3 co-chairs for each one of those committees and councils. And so if you're a practitioner and you're not already a member, I'll certainly encourage you to explore membership. But that's not the point of today's call. So I will now, and we'll have time also at the end for questions. If folks have any questions related to ULI outside of the TAPS program, we're happy to field those as well. But to keep us moving and to really sort of jump into the technical assistance panel program specifically, I'll pass it off to Rachel Griffith, who is a ULI member and co-chair of our technical assistance panel program. So Rachel.
Thanks, Kevin. So I'm here as a volunteer, as Kevin said, because I really believe in this program, and I think that it's a really unique program that is offered to our communities in this area, and I want more communities to take advantage of it. So what is a technical assistance panel? Most simply, it's a small group of experts in their field who are all ULI members who come to your community for 2 to 3 days to solve a specific issue related to land use or real estate that your community decides on what the issue is. So basically, ULI pulls from its membership of its most senior level members to answer your community's most pressing challenges related to real estate and land use. Like I said, you identify the issue. And so here on the screen are a list of potential technical assistance panel topics that we've done in the past. So corridor revitalization, identifying the reuse potential of particular buildings or sites, identifying economic and land use issues related to public or private land use situations, market feasibility, financial structuring, how to pay for things, that sort of thing. So because ULI's members are so interdisciplinary, from planners, architects, to real estate developers, to commercial brokers, to different kinds of financing lenders and things like that. So the teams can really be interdisciplinary and can really provide you with a perspective that you wouldn't be able to get if you were even issuing an RFP for these kinds of services. Next slide, please, Kevin. So how does it work? Like I said, this is a relatively unique program. So you develop the scope of work. So you identify a number of questions that you would like the panel to answer. And so the questions are kind of the most important part because the panel operates on a limited time. So it's 2 to 3 days that the panelists are in your community working on your project. So you don't want the questions to be too broad that they can't answer it within that amount of time. And you don't want them to be too specific because they have a full 2 to 3 days to work on it. So ULI staff will help you craft the questions in a way that's an appropriate scale to the panel. And then ULI will recruit the panelists from their membership specific to the needs of your project. So if you've got a project that's looking at the reuse potential of a specific building, maybe they will get some real estate developers who have experience developing that sort of thing, as well as some architects to take a look at the building itself, as well as somebody who works at a bank who might be able to talk about financing for the project and that sort of thing. And then there are various options for how the panel can actually be conducted. So in years past, all panels, to my knowledge, were conducted in person. But now in this current and post-pandemic world, we have other options. There's an option to do it entirely virtually, or also to do a hybrid approach that could include the tour component, maybe being in person, but then parts of the stakeholder interviews and briefing sessions and work sessions could be held virtually. So that is up to your community, as long as what you want is in line with current public health guidelines. And then, like I said, the panel itself is pretty fun, the process, and it's very intensive. It takes place over 2 or 3 days. And there's briefing sessions, there's interviews with lots and lots of stakeholders so that the panelists can get a really full perspective on all aspects of the issue that you're trying to address. And there's also work sessions between the panelists where they sort of identify what their recommendations might be and develop some graphics and a final presentation. And then at the end of the panel, there's a final presentation given to you, the project sponsor. Usually the stakeholders who were interviewed are invited, and sometimes it can be open to the general public. And then usually about 6 to 8 weeks after that, the final report is produced and then delivered to you, the project sponsor. So that is the final deliverable. And if you're interested in this, which I guess you all are because you're on the call today, I recommend going onto ULI's website to check out some previous reports that have been done. You can see they're really professional. They've got great graphics, great photography, and really provide a good roadmap for how you can start working towards the recommendations in the report. And like I've said, this is a really unique program. And some of the things that I think make it exceptionally unique and beneficial for communities are the things on the screen. So it's a really simple application. It's a one-page application. And the application really demonstrates 2 things. One, that you have a question or a series of questions and a project scope that can be solved within the technical assistance panel period. And also that if you're awarded this program, you will be able to complete the panel. And so you get to decide what issue is most important to your community. So, many of you have probably applied to many funding programs in the past, and sometimes it's totally in line with what you want to do, and sometimes you sort of have to pivot what you want to match the funding source. But this is really tailored towards what is most valuable to your community. Like I said, there's flexibility with the panel format, whether it's in person, virtual, or a hybrid of the two. And also, if you've got a really targeted question that doesn't really warrant the full 3 days, there's a possibility to make it on a shorter timeline. ULI is really flexible and can work with applicants on that sort of thing. And then the team itself of panelists is highly interdisciplinary, highly specific to your project, to be able to deliver unbiased and independent perspectives on the issue that you're looking for feedback on. And then there's also a lot of value in the process itself, particularly bringing the stakeholders to the table to talk about the issue. So, in a lot of communities, there's these deep-seated issues that people have been talking about for a long time. And just bringing people together and having an excuse to do that can be really valuable to keep the conversation going and to really help to understand each other. And then lastly, in contrast to other funding programs you may be more familiar with, there's a really quick turnaround time for this. So this application period that's open right now is for technical assistance panels that will happen this spring in May or June, most likely. And so 6 to 8 weeks after that, you have your final report and it's done. So you may be more familiar with an application period where you apply for the funding. 8 months later, you hear back whether you were successful. It takes 6 months to get under contract. Then you have 2 years to finish your project. So this is definitely not that. And for those of us who like more instant gratification, this is your program. Next slide, please. And so lastly, just to reinforce some of those benefits to your community of what you get through the Technical Assistance Panel program. Senior level ULI members who are very experienced in their field volunteer their time to come to your community to serve on this panel. So when ULI does this, they try to capture what the value is that these panelists are providing your community. So they ask what the typical billable rate is for the panelists, and then they know how many hours they've put into the panel. And typically this amounts to a cumulative amount of about $100,000 in donated services. So it's a really valuable program that you can bring top level expertise to your community. It's also a fast-paced and enjoyable process. And like I said, just the process of bringing the stakeholders to the table to resolve an issue can be valuable in and of itself. And in terms of solving a specific problem or generating ideas and solutions for a specific problem, the Technical Assistance Panel program really packages that process really well to solve the issue relatively efficiently. And then lastly, what do you get? The final deliverable is this really professional report that provides a roadmap for future success. And also it can serve to make the case for funding if some of the recommendations involve improvements that require you to search for additional funding. So having this report can really help show that you know what you're doing. And then what does the project sponsor give in exchange for all this? So it's your responsibility to help ULI develop a list of stakeholders. And this is typically, Kevin can correct me on this, but it's typically 20 to 40 stakeholders. It's a lot. So we really want a wide and broad view of all the stakeholders' impressions of this particular topic that you choose. And then you also are responsible for preparing and compiling detailed briefing materials for the panelists to review prior to the panel beginning. So this can be really anything that's relative to your community and the project. So previous planning documents, if it's about a specific property, any records related to the property that are relevant, land development proposals, that sort of thing. And then also, if you choose to have an in-person panel, it will be your responsibility to fund the panelists' room and board because they are volunteering their time. And then also there will be parts of the panel that you'll be required to participate in, including the initial briefing session, the tour, and the final presentation, and then potentially some other things in between. But like I said, it takes place over a course of 2 to 3 days. So it's really a compressed timeline where you'll be having to do things for this. And then lastly, so like I said, the main value of the program is this donated services provided by ULI members. And so in exchange for this, the program requires a $15,000 cash match. However, we're doing things a little bit differently this year. And for some communities, the $15,000 sounds like a great deal. And is really easy to come up with. For other communities, it's a little bit more of a barrier. And we want this program to be as accessible to folks as possible. And so if that cash match becomes an issue for you, we still want to hear from you. We still want to know about your project. We still want to know about your interest. And there may be a possibility to tailor the scope, to find an outside source of funding, that sort of thing. So please contact us whether or not you think the cash match is an issue. And next slide, please. And so for that, that's a little bit about the program and how it works. And I'm going to pass the presentation off to my colleague, Veronica, who is also a fellow member of the Technical Assistance Panels Committee.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you all for being here. Like Rachel, I'm really excited about this program. I believe in it. I think it offers such a fantastic value for communities. And so I'm really happy to talk about it with you. So the application process. Applications can sometimes be a little bit daunting. And one of the things we want to do is that we want to make this process really straightforward and easy for you. And so we just want to talk a little bit about it. So eligible applicants are nonprofit organizations, 501c3s, and government organizations. And so I imagine that everyone on this call falls into that category. So Kevin and other colleagues can provide a more historical overview. I believe that in the past we've had TAPs with nonprofits, as well as various sizes of governmental organizations, such as townships and so on. And so this program is designed exactly for this type of organization that you represent. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the application process and the timeline are pretty straightforward. The application itself is a relatively short document. You will need to submit a couple of key points, your research questions, your area of specific focus, but the application overall is very straightforward and very manageable. So we really want you to not feel daunted by it, but to know that it's a simple, easy application, basically speaking. In addition, ULI is here to help you with that application. Just as Rachel said that if you have any questions about the $15,000 cash match, any questions about the application are questions that we welcome as well. And so ULI is available to you to help shape, for example, your research questions. What's the exact scope? What's the exact focus? And so we welcome you reaching out and helping us, or that is allowing us to help you and brainstorm with you to shape the application so that it matches a realistic scope and also matches exactly what you need and want from this program. So this year we've introduced a timeline, and you can see that on the slide. On October 11th, our round opened, and this is our informational webinar for you. Between November 1st and 12th, we ask that you have a pre-application meeting with ULI staff, and this is required. Again, this is a straightforward, very doable meeting, and the idea is that it's designed to help you shape your application so that it meets your needs best. The application itself, again, it's not daunting at all. And applications are due on December 22nd. If you submit your application and you see the deadline coming up, be in touch with ULI staff about how that's looking for you. Our goal is, of course, we have the timeline, but we want to work with you and to make this doable. Then at the start of the year, between January 3rd and 14th, there's going to be a project discussion with the TAPS committee, reviewing all the applications that come in. By January 28th, we're going to notify applicants of awards. And then between May 1st and June 30th, you can look forward to the spring technical assistance panels being conducted and you receiving all the great benefits that this program has to offer. So this is a short overview of the application process. We did want to address it because we know that applications can sound daunting, but this application process is actually very straightforward. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to pass it back to Kevin, and we'll hear from a couple of previous TAPS sponsors.
Thanks, Veronica, and thanks, Rachel. And again, I'll just remind folks, if during that part of the presentation you sort of thought of any questions, feel free to jot them down. We'll have informal Q&A at the end, or feel free to drop them in the chat too. We can address them at the end. But we also wanted to give an opportunity for some of our more recent TAP sponsors to share a little bit about their scope, because I think they're both really interesting scopes, but also talk about the process itself, why they thought it would be a fitting process, and what some of the outcomes were. So to kick us off, I will pass things over to Justin Smiley, who is with West Whiteland Township, to talk about some of the sort of placemaking and activation work we did there back in October of 2020. So Justin.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, so why did we do TAP, and what was our project? Let me give you a little background on West Whiteland. We're a little west of Philadelphia and Chester County. We consider ourselves the crossroads of Chester County because Route 30 and PA 100 go right through the center of our township. Our project really was to identify strategies in managing a lot of the growth that we had coming, and I'll get to that in a little bit, and really creating a sense of place in our town center district. We call it a suburban center in Chester County, and how to really make a sense of place of that that zoning district from a car-dominated commercial center. We have 4 shopping centers and a regional mall within that district, and there's a lot of opportunities there that we really wanted ULI to focus on. But how could we do that? Because one of the things we're very guilty of when we were going through the application process was we were very detailed in our questions we asked ULI. So it was great to know that we could work with them to really hit home some of these questions, to whittle them down a little bit so the panel could help us with those. So one of the main things that we asked ULI to do is how do we leverage our existing assets within our town center? Our town center has been around since the Revolutionary War. So there's tons of assets, like historic resources like you see in the picture there, as well as just various assets like parks and older communities that we really didn't want to ignore, as far as wanted to integrate them with this, creating a sense of place for our community and not destroy the community character that was there within the quadrants that we have for that intersection of the crossroads. So the things that we really hit home was we need to take care of our historic assets, our open space. How do we bring about economic vitality and transportation component, not just for vehicles, but for our growing community. Our community recently has really opened up. We've just approved and have built over 1,300 new units, mostly apartments, within the town center. So there's a lot of growth in this town center, a lot of residential growth to help frequent this town center. So how best were we able to do that? And that's what ULI helped us to do. So next slide, please. So this is the recommendation mapping of our crossroads. You see how it's in the middle is the 30 and 100 intersection. Really what we got in return was, a great product, I think. I mean, really the whole process, like Rachel said, was fun because we really got to advertise to ULI what a great place, this town center is and what a great place it could be. So we just needed that little spark to help this initiative, and ULI was able to accomplish that with the TAP program. We really got to, picking the stakeholders. While, you think 30 to 40 stakeholders may be daunting, but they come real quick, especially in a place like ours. We do have a lot of contacts with various communities, but we found that, at first it was daunting, but when we got to it, we're already at 30 people and we need more. Okay, are you okay with that, ULI? And they were perfectly fine with that. So really the outcomes, as you see, we wanted a whole lot of sense of place brought in the community, really alleviate some of these underutilized areas within our mall area, as well as our commercial areas and strip malls. We, for this, we had 3 strategies: place, identity, wayfinding, and governance. And under each of those strategies, ULI provided us with 14 recommendations for each to really start the implement process. And to let you know, we are starting to implement this a year later, or a little less than a year later. We started about 6 months ago. As the recommendations have told us, we started a survey with our community that surrounds the town center on what they like and dislike about it and what amenities they'd like to see. We've also had a newsletter talking about the crossroads and its future. And then in 2022, we're going to start our brand new planning process, so our new planning phase, because they happen every 10 years. So this, again, was that spark to help us know where we're going the next 10 years. And it's really to help us focus on the town center and the Exton Crossroads. Last but not least, we have the university, our local university, Westchester University, creating GIS urban modeling for what areas we think should be or prime for redevelopment, and they're doing scenario testing on what can and can't happen through zoning regulations. So it's really cool. And again, we would like to thank ULI for providing this great opportunity to help us move forward for the next 10 years.
Thanks so much, Justin. And I will say, working with West Whiteland Township was the first time that we were sort of forced to deliver a TAP in a new model. We delivered that TAP in a hybrid model where we all the panelists stayed outside for the duration of the entire visit. We had our working session outside, but then we virtually interviewed all of our stakeholders. That was the first time we conducted virtual stakeholder interviews. And I have to say, personally, we saw just a tremendous amount of participation from folks. Oftentimes in the past, we'd see folks, who had scheduling conflicts or could dedicate the hour for the interview, but would have a hard time dedicating the rest of the time to get to and from the interview. And so I think out of the sort of experimentation we were able to do with West Whiteland, we really created a pretty solid model, and a model that we then replicated when we worked with PIDC and Tom Doffo and his team, really exploring how to position a couple of sites in Philadelphia's Lower Schuylkill District for long-term life sciences investments. So Tom, I'll pass it over to you now to talk a little bit more about the project we worked on with PIDC.
Great, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity. And I'm gonna focus more on the process and less the details of the TAP, because I think that'll vary from site to site. As Kevin said, we have some properties and we call the Lower Schuylkill portion of Philadelphia, about a mile south of the heart of the medical research campus in University City. And Kevin, if you could go to that maybe next slide that shows the locator map. It's in Southwest Philadelphia. And just by way of background for folks who don't know, PIDC is the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation. And we are a public-private partnership whose mission is to use real estate and financing to drive investment and growth in the city of Philadelphia. And so on a real estate group, which is what I head up, we had properties on the river near Bartram's Garden, for anyone who's been there, a 200-year-old historic homestead for John Bartram, and now a public park that are industrially zoned, had largely been vacant and underutilized. And we conducted a comprehensive planning effort that we released in 2013, we call the Lower Schuylkill Master Plan, that sort of focused on a much larger area that we thought could be repositioned for renewed investment and development. The area we focused on is this area here, which is close to University City, but had some challenges. And so we asked ULI through the TAP to really focus on a couple of things. Do the properties that we have, which total about 40 acres, 20 acres in the northern site, which is the N on this image, and 20 acres, which is the southern site, which is the S on this image. Can we integrate them into an emerging and growing life sciences, specifically cell and gene therapy district in Philadelphia? Can they help us figure out access and connection strategies? And then are there ways, mechanisms to improve the impressions in an area that's not seen very significant investment or development for a long period of time? And ULI's TAP program was great. We had to do this, as Kevin noted, remotely. We did a driving caravan from a handful of the sites. We sort of met in University City and drove people down on the most interesting Zoom call that I've ever been a part of, where we sort of had everybody on the call and had to narrate and make it work. From University City down to the University of Pennsylvania's Pennovation Works campus, which is the area in sort of shaded light purple on this image, and then across the Grays Ferry Avenue Bridge through what is unfortunately a very circuitous route, which is part of the reason why we wanted to talk to folks at ULI to help us figure out how to make the connections better and improved. We do have some assets. We have a wonderful riverfront trail. We have a burgeoning recreational access along the river. We have a trolley line that connects us to University City and Center City. And we have a 45-acre historic park. And so we have a lot of amenities and options, but the connections to the area for investors and developers and employees are a challenge, and as well as connections for people who live there to other parts of the city are also a challenge. And so the panel was great. We had a really engaged conversation on, albeit a little bit gray and chilly December day, but we made it work. And really, I have to give a lot of credit to the ULI team for this, because this just felt to me as if the COVID situation had put us in a scenario where 100 different things could go wrong. And probably 50 things did go wrong, but Kevin and this is not, and this is a positive thing. Kevin and the folks at ULI, we never saw them. So it was like a good like wedding planner. A lot of things happen. You just kind of work your way through it. It was great. It was really, it was a well done event. One that I worried about just the logistics that nobody could foresee before when we signed up for this. There wasn't a pandemic, and then we got one dropped in the middle of it, and then we made it work, and it worked well. And I do think the virtual sort of session where we got to talk through the early stage recommendations was really robust and was really well done as well. And I think that's important, because you do get quick feedback, you get early ideas that get refined a little bit when you get the final product. And I was happy with our panel. One of the things that they recommended for us was on this image here, they see a blue dot between the 1 and the N on the image. That's an area where our properties are disconnected from the rest of the city by a freight rail line that is at grade, that cannot be opened up. And I told the panelists in the pre-meeting, or the advisors in the pre-meeting, don't think about going through that. Ignore that. We've gone through this 100 times. We've lost 100 times. Skip it. Spend your focus somewhere else. And like a good set of experts, they ignored me. And I'm glad they did, because I had been focused on the limitation of this particular property, this access point, serving as access for everything: vehicles, pedestrians, you name it, trucks. And the team of panelists or the experts that we had was great, because said, yeah, access can be different for different groups. And so they made a recommendation to separate out sort of vehicular access, which can't go through that route, with pedestrian access, which we could work out some type of intervention and kind of go up and over the rail obstruction. And they talked about sort of upgrading some transit that had been an idea that we had thought about when we did the initial Lower Schuylkill master plan. And I think I had said to the team when they came back to us, I was happy that they did, because it affirmed a concept we had explored years ago and sort of put on the back burner for a number of reasons. But in much the way I always like when we do appraisals, we have two independent parties that come up with the same value or same recommendation. It's probably a good idea. It's kind of the route to follow. So I appreciate the fact that they helped kind of update and validate a concept that we had before. I won't get into any more of the details of this. They do offer short-term, medium-term, and long-term ways to intervene and make improvements, which I think is important, especially in our particular situation. But as a sponsor, it was I thought we got great value for our sponsorship amount. We got some really great thinking with some talented individuals. We didn't have to do a ton of work on our end. ULI really does take care of it, which is important when you're looking for your resource allocation, not just dollars, but staff time. They really took care of that for us and kind of led us through the process. Which is important, because they're the experts in putting these together, and we had some ideas and could provide some background and content, and they organized a really productive process for us. And I would highly recommend anybody who's got a relatively defined but not super specific question that you need asked to explore this. I think you'll find that you will get multiples, maybe an order of magnitude in value back.
Great. Tom, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about that project and about the product. I really appreciate that you ended sort of with a focus on the process, because I think we often hear one of two things as we're concluding a technical assistance panel. And that's either there was really deep value in the process itself, perhaps even more so than the final recommendations and the report, or there's really tremendous value in those recommendations in the report. I think Rachel mentioned, leveraging that to unlock additional funding, providing sort of that unbiased opinion to apply for different resources and things like that. And so whether it's the final report and those recommendations, or it's the process itself of convening 30 to 40 stakeholders and focusing everyone's attention and thoughtfulness on a very sort of defined scope for 2 to 3 days. I think different sponsors find value in those different components, and hopefully most sponsors find value in both of those components as well. So with that, I would love to use the last between 10 and 15 minutes to answer questions if folks have any. Feel free to just unmute yourself and chime in, drop a question in the chat if you're unable to do that. Feel free to direct questions either to our past sponsors or to our committee leaders and volunteers as well.
I have a question.
Great.
My name is Nan Latimer. I'm from Franklin Township in Chester County. The particular project that I'm thinking of, there's an issue with traffic. So in the panel of experts, is there somebody from PennDOT or somebody that can address those issues?
Yeah, so one of the things I would say is we're always careful not to guarantee a particular panelist from a particular organization. We would work, with any potential sponsor to really take a really deep dive into the scope and into the question. And then certainly we would, if it's a transportation or traffic related study, we could, try to identify folks from PennDOT, but we would also look at who, all of our transportation planners are sort of across the membership, what their past experience has been. Perhaps it's actually theoretically more helpful to have someone who's no longer with PennDOT, but has experience working with PennDOT or previously worked for PennDOT or something like that. So we do spend a lot of time curating who those panelists are. I'll say too, on our end, once we work with a sponsor to identify the scope, we usually come up with a few kind of bulleted areas of expertise that we're looking for from across our members and potential panelists. And then we kind of put out an open call to all ULI Philadelphia members to apply. And we will often get 3 or 4 times the number of members interested in volunteering than what the number of volunteer sort of opportunities are. So there's a tremendous amount of interest from ULI members in participating in this program. And I will say that we work really closely with the sponsor to identify sort of the expertise of those panelists. But I do want to manage expectations and be really transparent that we wouldn't necessarily guarantee, someone from one specific organization. Nidhi. Oh, sorry, Tom, do you have something to add?
If I could just add to that. So Kevin and Laura and the folks at ULI were really open to our need to curate the expert and the panelists, because we felt it very important, given where our assets are, that we had strong community representation. So not just sort of technical experts, but people who could speak to the life on the ground sort of in Southwest in that area. And I think about I want to say about a third of our experts or stakeholders were in fact community organizations and community members. And I appreciated that. And it was important to us to help us sort of make a point to the community that we're not just kind of coming in with our vision of what's going to happen here, that it really was meant to be collaborative. And Kevin and Laura and the rest of the folks at ULI were extraordinarily receptive to that.
Thank you very much.
Nidhi, I see your hand raised. Do you still have a question?
Thank you. Hi, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for this great session. So I guess my question is just a bit of background. I work for the City of Philadelphia for the Office of Sustainability, and my job is climate mitigation. So I look at all my work, all my projects are done through the lens of, how do these projects help us achieve our climate goal or our carbon footprint? And so I was curious, listening to the presentation, is some of the work and the types of projects that the panel advises on, are there projects that connect to climate mitigation, climate change? Are there any examples? Because from the two examples, there's always an indirect connection, but I have to focus specifically on carbon reduction. So when I think of projects to work with you guys on, I'm not really sure if there's a fit or thanks.
Sure. Rachel or Veronica, do you want to take a first stab at that? I have some ideas too.
I think absolutely yes, that there is a fit. And I know I would think this is a Kevin question, because sometimes there are specific opportunities that come from ULI National that are geared towards specific things like sustainability and climate change and things like that, that it sounds like what the types of projects that you're working on might fit into one of those special taps.
Yeah, and I know, Kevin, we're working on you with something like that. I was thinking more like with these specifically with the technical assistant panel projects. Is there also a fit there? But thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the very short answer is yes, absolutely. I think, as Rachel sort of mentioned, the scopes are really defined by the sponsor themselves. And just because you haven't seen a scope that a TAP covered in the past doesn't mean that a scope can't be covered in the future. And I mean, that's really sort of true of land use in general, right? The issues that we're facing today and tomorrow were not the issues that we were facing, 5 years ago. And so I think it's only natural that we would look at scopes of all different topics. And I will say too, ULI Global this year has released 3 new mission priorities related to diversity of the industry, housing affordability and attainability. And the third was really sort of decarbonizing the built environment, and has become a sort of the third leg of a 3-legged stool for ULI. So I think it's very much within the wheelhouse of our organization, and we would really welcome the opportunity to work on projects that would help advance that topic. So.
And one more thing to add is that there've been a couple opportunities that haven't panned out recently to do more policy oriented TAPs rather than like focusing on a specific site or community. And so I'm not sure if that would be more relevant to what you're doing, but I think that's something that we could also consider working on.
Yeah, I mean, our work broadly, the interventions for getting to our climate goals, they're policy interventions, but we also do projects, we do programs, pilots, studies, community engagement. So, but ultimately it's all about getting to the carbon reduction. So, I was just curious about the specific, like if we had to brainstorm on projects that we could come to this opportunity with, like, I'm trying to think like, what would they look like? But I will take that information and think about it a little bit more and see what we can do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just to chime in, to build on what Kevin and Rachel have said, I think that this is a great opportunity to think about how the TAPs can be expanded in terms of what they focus on, really looking at our contemporary and our upcoming and future concerns, and also to brainstorm, just as you were saying just now with ULI staff, about what would be a good focus of the TAP, because I think a wonderful side of this program is that it can be tailored for you and your needs. So I really, I think it's exciting to consider, and I echo Rachel and Kevin. I encourage you to reach out and think about options.
Thank you. We will do that. I think this sounds like a great opportunity.
Any other questions, Paul? Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think we are having some audio issues. If you'd like, you're welcome to type a short version of your question in the chat. We can try to answer it. Or maybe your audio will come back. Sometimes that magically happens. Any other questions or oh, yeah.
Sorry, one more follow-up questions. Do these technical assistance panels roll around, like there's, you know, there's the opening application for next year, but then do they come around a lot, is it?
So that's a great question, actually. Previously, we had to always accepted taps on a kind of rolling basis. And so there was no particular cycle to them. That made predicting the pipeline and then allocating the resources to delivering them a unique challenge. And so I think the plan moving forward is to, there will always be another cycle available. But I think generally speaking, we would look towards the fall and winter to identify taps for the spring, and then the spring and summer to identify taps for the fall. And that's the sort of new cycle that we'll try to get on. You know, you could imagine a situation where if there's just a tremendous amount of interest and we know of that interest up front, that we could make sort of strategic staffing decisions and resource decisions in order to kind of meet that demand. So that's what we're hoping to get through the cycles. So the application itself hasn't changed from the sort of before times, but these sort of application windows that we'll be rolling out each spring and summer and each fall and winter is really the new part. All right. Joyce, I saw you just turned your video on. Did you have a question or are you just saying hello?
Just saying hello.
Great, well, thank you for joining us. And then I'm reading, Paul, I just saw your message come through, so I'm going to just read this out loud if that's okay. So there are past instances where ULI has worked on small village centers that we would look at to see what might be possible, recognizing that the issues involved might be different. Can you point us to specific examples? I would be happy to. So there's a couple of ways that I would respond to that. One, Paul, I can follow up and send you a link. We have all of our past taps available on our website, so you can see sort of the work that we've done. I'd also be happy to kind of go through those and maybe point you to 2 or 3 directly that might be of particular relevance. And then the other option too, I'll provide my email at the end of today's presentation. I'd be happy to also sort of, and this is for anyone on the call, sort of set up that separate conversation so we can talk, you know, really intentionally about your communities, what the issues are, and then maybe I can provide some examples that sort of best address those issues. But in the meantime, I'll follow up with a link to all of our past taps and maybe some initial suggestions on where to take a look for some examples. And that's true for everyone too. I should mention, if you visit our website at philadelphia.uli.org, under the resources tab, you can find all of our past technical assistance panels. But as we mentioned, just because you don't see an example there does not mean it's a topic or an issue that we shouldn't explore in the future either. Well, it's exactly 1 o'clock now, and I want to be really mindful of everyone's time. So if anyone needs to jump off, feel free. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to learn a little bit more about the technical assistance panel. I want to particularly thank Rachel and Veronica, Tom and Justin for sharing with us their experiences and involvement in the TAPS program. Hopefully everyone found the information today to be particularly helpful. On this screen here, you see the general Philadelphia email. Feel free to email that with any questions you might have. And I keep an eye on that every day. But I'm happy to sort of stop the recording. And if anybody has any sort of informal questions or wants to hang back for a second, I'm always happy to stay on for a couple of minutes. So thanks everyone for joining us. And in particular, thank you to all of our past sponsors and volunteers for helping with today's webinar.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been great. I appreciate the opportunity. I have to jump to another meeting, so we'll be.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Appreciate it.